In this video, we are going to add the arm motor mount, and motor brace to the crossbar. First part is going to be adding this motor brace. The motor brace consists of a 144 millimeter angled, 2 half-inch socket head cap screws, and 2 keep nuts. One thing to note as we assemble these, that it will be offset a little bit. So instead of being the top hole in the hole pattern on Tetrix, it will be offset at the 45, both to the right, looking at it from underneath. So when we place it there, that's where it will be. Let's go over to Fusion. Here's our Pushbot. We want to just look at the crossbar, so I'm going to hide the other components. We're going to go under crossbar and make that our active component. Let's go ahead and bring in the angle 144 millimeter. And I want to orient that so that it's in the correct position. That out there. Let's bring in now our screws. Screws folder. There it is, screws and nuts. We want the half-inch socket head cap screw. Want it on the back side here, won't we? Capture that position. I want 2 of those. Copy and paste. 2 of those and 2 of the keep nuts. Orient that. Let's copy and paste one more into our design. Okay. We got all the pieces. Let's go ahead and put them into position. Now, if you were actually building this, what I noticed when I was putting it together initially is that it doesn't quite match up. The systems, make sure this is rigid under motion. I would go and not quite tighten this up all the way, this angled bracket, until my motor mount is attached. So I would loosely screw it together, but make sure that there is some room, because if we look at the bottom up, it doesn't quite line up here. There's a little bit of a gap there, and so when we put our motor mount on there, just to make sure that we have some wiggle room, we want to make sure that, and those holes are lining up. That's good. Make sure there's enough room to play with these pieces so they do line up correctly. I'm going to swing around and look at the back side to put these screws into. There we go. Select our joint tool, and that menu came up in just the wrong place. Okay, that is going to go in over there. Nope, that missed it completely. Doesn't even exist right there. It's this one that I want. There we go. Okay, for that one, another joint here, and this one is on this far side. There we go. Okay. Another rigid joint between the nut and bottom part of this 144 millimeter angled channel. There we go. Capture that. Joint between that and swinging around again. Bottom part down here. Good. Okay, yeah, from front, there we are. Let us add our motor mount now. So motors and mounts. Grab our motor mount. And as we put this in, there's this adjustment part where you tighten it down to make sure the motor is rotated in the correct position. We want that pointed down according to the instructions. That's what they have. I assume they've tested it out and made sure that it works better down than up. So we're going to put that in there. And then under Tetrix parts, we're going to go under screws and nuts. We're going to add the 1.5 inch screw socket head cap screw. That's what comes with these motor mounts. And that is already in the correct position. I'm going to make a copy of it. And let's paste that in there. And 2 keep nuts. And I'm going to flip that over. Actually, when we put it in, let's have it that way. It'll be easier to grab, and then we'll just flip it later. I'll keep that oriented that way. It's copy and paste another one in. Perfect. Okay. Now swing around to grab the back side of that motor mount joint, rigid joint between this hole here and it's going to be up here, and it's, I believe, just offset. But let's check. Let's look at the instructions. We have time to put that in there. Where do they say to place it? So in the middle of those hole patterns, yep, just to the side. To the right side if you're facing the robot. So that'll be this hole right here. Good. Okay, we can check and make sure those holes are lining up. That one looks good. I'm going to pan down. And see here, this is what I was talking about. It doesn't quite line up. So you want to leave these screws over here, these longer screws, you want to leave them loose so that these holes will line up. Also, this has to be brought forward just a little bit. So it doesn't quite work, but we're going to make the best of it by tightening this motor mount first and then finishing to tightening up these 1.5 inch screws. So if you're overseeing a project, you're doing it yourself, this build, let's make sure you do that first. You could even attach the motor mount to this bottom part first and then this 144 millimeter bar and then screw it into place. That could work as well. Okay, let's place our screws. Here, create a joint between that screw and this hole right here. Okay, it's in place. Swing around again. Zoom in to that screw. I want a joint between shaft of that screw and bottom hole of the motor mount. There we go. Okay, flip around to the other side. Let's put the nuts on the screws. Position where I can see them both. There we go. One thing I like to do when I'm building is I like to swap out these 1.5 inch screw for the part that's not adjusted. On that motor mount, if you use that, then these come out to be the same length. It looks nicer. Will it work the way it came in the package? Yeah, works just fine. But if you want a different look, you want to have those be symmetrical. That's one thing I found I like. It just looks a little nicer. And we're going to need to flip that over. There we go. Last joint between this keep nut and the lower end. And we'll flip that around. So here's that little gap I was talking about. So I matched up the keep nut with the hole on the bar, the 144 millimeter bar, not the screw. So you can see that that's just off by a little bit. If we loosen up these screws in the real world, that will drop this down a little bit, and we can screw that together first and then tighten up these screws here. All right, so we have placed the motor mount on. Now we are going to move on to adding the motor. Now the directions call to add one of the older motors. Those are the Tetrix motors, and we are going to use instead, let's go to the motors folder. It's the Never Rest. I'm sorry, yep, this never rest up here, not the 20 orbital gear, but the regular never rest. And you can swap these gearboxes out for 1 to 20, 1 to 40, 1 to 60. Let's insert one of those into our current design, and I'm going to rotate it over so that the shaft is pointing out to our left as you're looking at it from the front. And bring that over and back just a bit. So it's in line there. We also need to grab from the gears a 40-tooth gear. It's already positioned correctly. We need to scroll down to the bottom to a motor collar. Take that this way. Okay. And the screws that will work with all of this. We're going to go up to the screws and nuts. We're going to pick these 0.375 inch button head cap screws. And we will ultimately need 4 of these. Bring that out there. That's 1. Copy. Paste in 2. Control V. Paste in 3. Control V. Number 4. Great. So we have all the parts. I am going to make the gear, 40-tooth gear, grounded for next little bit as we paste or as we join these together. The first joint I'm going to make is between the 40-tooth gear and the motor collar. So looking at the motor collar with a little extrusion, this little extrusion should always go into your gears. I'm going to grab that ring there. And grab this inner ring there of the gear. And let's swing around and make sure those holes all line up. They do. Very good. Let's capture that. Swinging around to the back here. Let's place the screws into these 4 holes now. So joint tool, grab the top of that shaft, place it in there. Capture that joint. There, into there. Oh, that one got flipped. There we go. Joint. You go in here. That looks better. And joint. This one goes in here. Okay. Now we want to add the motor. Let's place the motor into our gearbox here. Or I'm sorry, into the motor mount. So join, this is going to be a rigid joint between this motor and this motor mount. There we go. We're going to keep it flush for now. We may adjust it later as we add the arm to get our gears to match up. But for now, it's exactly where we want it. Now, because this motor is a solid piece, this motor axle will not turn. What we need to do is to fake the motion, we're going to turn this motor mount on the axle itself. So let's take a look. We want to take this motor mount, I want to create a joint. It is going to be a revolute joint between position. There we go. Between this empty part of the shaft there and this shaft there. Okay. We want to slide it on And again, this is areas we can adjust to get it to mesh up. We have a little bit of room. Let's put this on most of the way. Like that. Click OK. Oh, it's resulting in a conflict because I forgot to unground it. That's why. Okay. One more time. With feeling. Revolute joint, position. Select this interior space. Axle shaft. Oh, it says it already exists. Let's undo that. Undo joint. Which joint is that? That's not the motor, is it? It was the motor. Let's redo that one. Okay. Now let's create our joint. Motion, revolute, position. This void. To this. Oh, keep forgetting to unground it. I'm going to create the same problem again. Unground. Okay, now let's do this. Joint. Revolute joint. Position between this void and this axle. Great. We're going to slide that on there. Sure, let's go a little more than halfway on. Great. And now if I grab this, I'm able to revolve it around. All right, that looks good. I think we're done with that now. Let's go ahead and turn everything back on. And let's make our Pushbot the active component. So we can see everything, otherwise it gets that ghosty look to it. There we go. There's our Pushbot so far.